So welcome everyone. My name is John Taylor. I am the museum assistant at the Margaret Chase Smith Library and also the state coordinator for National History Day here in the state of Maine. Typically the interviewer for this ongoing program has been my boss, Dr. David Richards, but anytime we do anything that's connected to National History Day, of course, that comes to me. And so as anybody's been following the series, we've had a few students participate, and we've had our first intern that participated as well in this interview series. And so we figured we need to have a teacher who's been part of this program for many, many years. Actually, I'll ask you in a few minutes here how many years that is. Start thinking about that one. But I also want to point out that the teacher that we are going to interview today, of course, is Kathi Kearney from Greely Middle School, but I have to say, has to be probably one of the more successful teachers in the last 10 years throughout the country in NHD nationally. I can't think of another teacher who has walked across the stage more than you you have in the past couple of years with all your students' successes down at the national contest. And one of the other reasons we are doing this interview right now is because the national contest is currently going on. Unfortunately, it's virtual again for the second year in a row, because typically the national contest takes place at the University of Maryland in College Park, and it's a week-long contest that's filled with lots of fun and stress and excitement and everything else in between. And students get to go to DC and see their senators and things like that as well during all this. But unfortunately, it's virtual this year. And since tomorrow, as our recording, tomorrow will be the award ceremony for the national contest, we thought we would interview Kathi Kearney from Greely Middle School. So thanks for joining us.
Great to be here.
Yeah, great. So before we talk about NHD, and I keep getting long-winded here, the first thing I want to ask is not only because we are interviewing you because of National History Day, is because you actually have a connection to our library as well. Is that correct?
I most certainly do. My mother was the first librarian at the Margaret Chase Smith Library, and she got to open and catalog everything that was in the boxes.
Yes, so it's my understanding that when the boxes were initially packaged down in DC and then sent up to Maine to the library, that's the stage that she was opening those boxes and seeing everything. So it was before anything was cataloged. She was really on the ground level starting to create the system that we currently still use after nearly 40 years.
Yep, she had to open every box and she had to catalog what was in it. And every night when she'd come home from work, she would tell us about some new exciting thing she'd found in one of the boxes. And that's when Margaret was still living there too.
Yes, Margaret, for those who do not know, Margaret was a living part of the museum and the library for 12 years?
Yeah.
Until she passed away in 1995. So do you remember any interesting things of your mom coming home and telling you that she found that day or anything like that?
I surely remember the political cartoons because my brother was a political cartoonist.
Mm-hmm.
And so
what's your brother's name?
Greg Kearney.
Okay.
And every time she would find a funny cartoon, she would make a copy of it and bring it home and show it to us. My brother was the cartoonist at the Casper Star Tribune for about 25 years. And then he got into computer IT stuff. He currently works for Apple, but he self-syndicates his cartoons.
Oh, wow. So it's kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot in the Midwest, a lot in the West, and the Portland Press Herald and a bunch of little papers here in Maine, and a few other places. But that was really fun when my mom would come home and say, well, I found a cartoon by her block or something like that.
Yeah.
Then my brother would get very excited about it.
Oh, that's great. That's one of my favorite things at our library actually is the cartoons, because it says so much and it gives a lot of context and a lot of backstory to not only her political career and what's going on politically, but it also gives a little insight on just, gender and stereotypes during that time. I mean, she was a woman being portrayed in a man's world, I guess, if you want to put it that way. But it's very fascinating. This is a woman who was drawn in over 400 cartoons throughout her career and lifetime. And we have a lot of them that are, framed and published in a book that we have in our library as well. But, I was explaining to you before we came in the green room, we'll call it the green room. I was explaining to you before we hit record here that, I've been doing an overhaul of our permanent exhibit. And one of the things that I decided to do was to really put more of the political cartoons out there. And I think it'll be a way it'll be an interesting way to have students really look at and dissect what was going on politically and culturally throughout her career and lifetime.
That's really fun. My brother
Yeah.
my brother's a cartoonist.
I would love to see some of his work. I'm gonna have to look him up after the interview.
I can actually send you the link to his blog where he puts them every day.
Oh, that would be great. I would love to see it. Maybe we should talk off air about getting some of his cartoons over here at the library as well. But back to your mother, I want to point out that I'm going to share the screen here real quick. We had our new curator of collections look through our collections for stuff connected to your mother, and we found this article, which is taken in 1981, December of '81, from the Waterville Sentinel, and this is an interview with your mom. Actually, have you seen this one?
I think she might have clipped it, and it might be somewhere in the family papers. She was a librarian, so she kept things.
Well, I'll send it along to you virtually at some point too, there, just so you can have it. But I just wanted to point out that we do have a photo of your mother here actually working through some of our files, and she being on the ground level there. And it's very interesting. The first director of our library was Dr. James Campbell. He, according to this article, he was the one that helped train her as she was going through and starting to set up this library.
That's right.
Did you ever meet him at all?
Yes, I did. He was actually my mother's advisor when she was getting her librarian degree at the University of Maine.
Oh, okay.
So I've met him several times, and he's the one who recommended that she apply for this job.
Oh, great. Well, that's really cool. So did you, speaking of being connected to the library and stuff, did you ever have any opportunity to actually meet the senator since she was alive at that time?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah? Do you have any interesting stories about the senator or anything that she told you?
No real interesting stories. I just remember meeting her on a number of occasions.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we would go and meet my mom at work and pick her up after work, and Senator Smith would be there, and we would chat just like you would chat with anybody.
Yeah.
She was pretty down to earth most of the time.
Did you ever get to go into her house when she was living in there? Because the house is connected to the museum and library. So.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. I've been in the house.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, when she was there. Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's very interesting. I always love hearing from previous employees or children of previous employees who knew Margaret. And it sounds like she was very welcoming to a lot of the employees' children, especially.
She was. She was always glad when we stopped by, and she made us feel, very welcomed.
Wow.
Yeah, she was great.
So moving on, as we talk about, because one of the big reasons is we're talking about National History Day, and it's going on right now, the national contest. I did mention that you are, I would have to guess, one of the more successful teachers nationally right now. Like I said before, at the awards ceremony of the national contest, I don't think I've seen a teacher walk across the stage with their students more than you have in the last, I guess this is my 8th year as the coordinator. So I do have a couple of photos that we're going to point out here. And maybe if you want to talk about some of these students or projects as well, we can also do that if anything comes to mind.
Well, there was the year that 3 of them won.
Yes. Right? You had an amazing year, and I think that was in 2018. And I got a couple of pictures from there. So, but we're
No.
going to start from the very beginning.
All right.
All right. So, first of all, I
My
want to point.
beginning or your beginning, John?
What's that?
My beginning or your beginning?
Thank you. Thank you for bringing it up. I'm very interested in how long you have, because you've been with NHD longer than I have.
Yeah, this is my finishing my
NHD in Maine.
14th, finishing my 14th year.
Okay. Yep. So 14th year. So that would be what you started in 2007.
I think so.
Okay. Okay, so I started as the state coordinator here in Maine. Actually, we're kind of similar in the sense that I got my start at in a different state as an intern when I was a graduate student, and it would have been right around that year. I think maybe 2006 or 2007. So we're right at the same cusp. But I actually started with Maine as a state coordinator in 2014.
Yeah.
So we're gonna go. Unfortunately, I don't have any pictures of you or anybody at the national office or national contest before, or the state contest before 2014. But I do want to mention that you have a student who won multiple times, and she was also a great help to me. And she actually served as my assistant for
Yeah, she was
a
great.
few years. She volunteered to be my assistant down in the national office or national contest. And she did a wonderful job for me, and it made my life much more stress-free throughout that week. Getting her help in not only herding the cats, is what I call it, herding the students around, but also helping me pass out buttons and T-shirts and set up our banners at the awards ceremony. And help corral people and and direct people when we were meeting our senators there down in DC as well. And so I do have a picture of her. We'll start there.
Okay.
So let me share the screen again. So of course, this is Madison Albert, who is one of your students. She is currently in Vanderbilt, correct?
Yep.
Yep. So she's studying in Vanderbilt right now, and she's studying biology, I believe, right?
I don't know.
Her main goal is she wants to be a doctor. I do know that.
Yep.
Right. So, but yes, she's studying biology, or I think pathology, something. I feel bad that I don't know off the top of my head, because she did tell me in the interview that I had with her about 8 or 9 months ago. But this is her actually helping me out as an assistant, handing out T-shirts and buttons to all of our students on the first day. But I wanted to start with this photo because she's also a national winner. And that started in 2015. As you can see, much more baby-faced in this photo here, but this is Madison winning the national award for the best women's history award in the country that year. And do you remember the project that she did?
Yes, it was. Oh, I'm blanking on the name, but it was the person who started the first school for African American girls in Connecticut.
Yes, Prudence Crandall, is that right?
There we go. Prudence
Yes.
Crandall. Yep.
Yes. So this is her getting the award. She was awarded for the Women's History Award at the national contest in 2015. It was a wonderful surprise for everybody involved to see her. And she was in 6th grade.
Yeah, 6th grader.
6th grade, winning that award. And that's her with the executive director of the Women's History Museum getting that award. And the reason I point this out is in 2016, she won that award again. She won it 2 years in a row. And as far as I know, she is the only person to win a special prize like that 2 years in a row. I did pick a picture with you and her together down after she had won that award. But there is another picture that I have of her with the same executive director at the national contest. And what I find very fascinating is when she went down to get her award in 2016, the first thing she said to Madison was like, "You look very familiar." And we had to really explain to her, is like, "Oh, this is the 2nd year in a row you are taking a picture with her." So she was quite surprised by that fact as well. But from that point forward, anytime I've run into her throughout the national contest any year, she always asks about Madison. So
oh, that's nice.
Yes. So you had two national awards right there, 2015 and 2016. And then you had an outstanding affiliate award winner. So every state awards one award in each division, the senior and junior categories. The top ranking one, and that would be Devin Gifford, won it for the junior category that year for representing the state of Maine. And then there's your big year. So this is your big year, 2018, and there I have many pictures of you walking across the stage, like I was mentioning before. But here's one of them, and so this is Connor. This is actually Madison's brother, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yep, winning this award, and she was actually my assistant that year, and it was very fun to watch her see her brother win this as she was working for me. But do you remember what he won here?
Yes, that was the Lee Allen History of Baseball Award for his documentary about Jackie Robinson.
Yes, which was I remember going and seeing that documentary. It was a great job done by him, and it really focused more on not necessarily him breaking the color barrier in baseball, but actually his work with the civil rights movement after he retired.
Yeah, I've actually used his documentary when I'm teaching about Jackie Robinson.
Oh, nice.
In some of my other classes.
Yes, that's great. So this is one of what did you say 3 awards that year?
Yes.
Yes, because then you have Don Strawbridge and
Matthew Gilbert,
who are right there winning first place, best documentary in the country for junior group documentary, and it was on.
That was on Senator Mitchell and the peace process in Northern Ireland.
Yes, and they were able to secure an actual interview with Senator Mitchell, correct?
Yes, they secured an interview with Senator Mitchell, and they also were very lucky that there's a whole collection of Mitchell's papers, including some of the newspapers that were actually published over in Ireland, newspaper clippings about the whole process.
Oh, wow.
They had a mother load of primary sources to work with.
They did, and I remember seeing them. I think what they were really actually hoping to win the Irish History Award that year.
They were. They wanted the trip to Ireland.
Right. Yes, they got an all expense paid trip to Ireland, the winners of those awards. And so I remember seeing them very bummed when that award was announced.
Yep.
And I was just in the back of my head because coordinators are privy to who will be winning and stuff like that, maybe like the night before. And I kept thinking in the back of my head, well, just hold on, guys, you're going to be happy here in a few minutes. So, but yes, and then what I actually really remember about that day, it was very funny, is I think they almost announced those awards back to back.
They did, because I couldn't get back up to our area where Maine was sitting before they announced these guys.
Yeah.
I was down there for Connor, and then I was on my way back up, and then they announced these guys.
Yes, I remember. I remember being down there, and we were taking pictures with Connor and trying to savor the moment. And thankfully, Madison was with me, because all of a sudden I realized they're announcing them, and I have to run back down there to make sure I can start getting some reaction pictures of them and congratulate them. And I just asked Madison, stay with your brother, you take the pictures here, I'm going to run, but you literally walked across the stage twice in less than 5 or 6 minutes,
That's right.
and Dr. Gorn, Kathi Kearney, is the executive director of NHD, is like, you look familiar. So, but yes, so that was your second award right there, that for 2018. And then you had the outstanding affiliate, one of the outstanding affiliate awards was awarded. Yes, Lucy Noonan. She got the outstanding affiliate award. I'm blanking though on what her project was that year, but
that was the Birmingham bus bombing.
Oh, okay. Yes, and she actually has a very great interest in the civil rights movement.
She does. She's done a lot of work.
And she has done a lot of work, and a lot of her projects are connected to it. And we'll get to another one here in a second.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is.
Can I just say something about what happened with her?
Sure, absolutely.
She entered in the exhibit category, and the day before we had to leave for nationals, which was a Saturday, I met her over or at the school, or it might have been a Friday. I don't remember, but we were there late. She might have come back after school on Friday, and she had a few more finishing touches, and her printer at home wasn't working. So we were printing stuff at school. And of course, you need a teacher at school to be able to stay late. So I was there with her. She had been trying the worst way to contact Bill Baxley, who was the attorney general in Alabama, I think, who ended up prosecuting the case against one of the Ku Klux Klan members successfully 40 years later.
Yep.
And he hadn't called because he had been involved in some kind of a case as a judge or whatever. I don't remember. But anyway, he calls while we're there the day before she had to finish up her exhibit and be on her way to Washington. And she like, what am I going to do? And I said, you're going to sit here and take the call and take notes.
Of course. That's the beauty of having especially an exhibit where you can still work on that all the way up until the last possible moment.
Yep.
Yeah.
So she did. She sat there and she took notes, and she did her interview without even having any questions in front of her because
no preparation.
Call.
Yeah. So this is one of the questions I had listed that I wanted to kind of throw out at you, and since you kind of brought it up, I'll go ahead and ask. I mean, your students are known for getting some juicy interviews.
They are.
They really are. And so, can you like not only give a few examples, but I mean, are there like interesting stories that go behind that, or some that you some of these interviews that may have surprised you that they were able to get?
Yep. Connor somehow wheedled Sharon Robinson, who is Jackie Robinson's daughter, into doing an interview with him, even when she said she wasn't doing any interviews anymore.
Oh, really?
Yep. So he talked her into it.
Wow.
She did an interview with him.
Yeah.
One that is not on your radar because she ended up not being able to compete, but I had a student who was doing the Kent State shootings. And there is a young girl who leans over the body of one of the students who was killed. And she said, I really want to know more about her. So we helped her track her down. And I said, call and see. Yeah. If she would do an interview with you. She hasn't talked very much to the press or anybody else. Yeah. And she called, and the lady was very, I would say, a little gruff with her, and a little bit intimidating, and kind of really didn't want to talk. And then she told her she was from Maine, and she goes, well, I kind of like Maine. and she said, you seem like a nice girl. Okay, I'll do the interview. Oh. It's Mary Beth Vecchio, I think is her name. And I was just reading something very recently about the 50th anniversary of the Kent State shooting. Yeah. And someone was able to get an interview with her, and she's only been interviewed maybe 2 or 3 times in 50 years. So I thought that was pretty cool that my student interviewer. Yeah, that's it. That one definitely was not on my radar. That's quite amazing. So so I'm sure she was able to hear some firsthand accounts of what was going on that day from a student's perspective, at least. Yes. Yes. You didn't show yet Lucy and Grace winning the American History Award, but there's a story behind that too. Yes. So let me put this up here real quick, back up here. And I before you get to that story, let me ask you this, because that could be a really intimidating thing for a young student
to do an interview like that, or to even reach out and try to even get an interview. So do you have like a particular process that you use with the students to kind of help them through that process?
Yep, I do have a process. Um, First, they need to determine if they're going to include an interview in their research, who it would be appropriate to interview.
Hmm.
And then they have to find the person.
Yes. Okay.
And so I've got a couple of kids who, may as well be hired by a detective agency because they've got this down to a fine science.
Yeah.
And um, so then once they found the person, and we use all kinds of ways, I teach them all kinds of ways to do that,
Yeah.
including using publicly available databases of phone numbers and so forth. So then they have to prepare to do the interview. And if you're a middle school kid, this is not something that you've ever done before, usually.
Yeah.
So we have a whole, and we made up a whole sheet to walk them through what is the most important things to ask. And then they come up with interview questions.
Hmm.
And then I have them prioritize the questions because they might or might not get to them all.
Oh,
And
that's a
then
great idea.
we we practice not sounding like a telemarketer.
Oh, so you actually will you sit down with them and pretend like you are the other person, or and kind of go through it that way, or
Yeah, or they do
yeah.
it with another student. Um,
Oh.
if you sound like a telemarketer, you're going to get hung up on. So you
Hmm.
can't sound like a telemarketer when you call. Sometimes they still hang up on you. I had one student who the response was, "Who are you and how did you find me?"
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that.
Um, I've had other students that were disappointed because the person didn't want to be interviewed and they thought it was a crucial interview. But then we've had things happen, like the girls who did the project on the Selma March last year,
Hmm.
they called up and got an interview with the youngest marcher to make it all the way from Selma to Montgomery. She said she'd do the interview. We actually did it at school in the librarian's office, and because there were 3 girls involved, so we put it on speakerphone for them. I actually got to sit in on that interview. I didn't say anything, of course, because it was the kids' interview, but it was absolutely fascinating. And then one of the girls had gotten so excited about her project that she convinced her mother to let her pick the vacation spot, and she chose to go to Alabama on vacation.
Yeah. Huh.
So when the lady, this is all pre-COVID, when the lady found out that she was coming to Alabama, she says, "Well, we have to meet in person then." And so she got to meet her in person. That was very cool.
Wow, that is really cool. Uh, so I guess I should point out first that this photo here, before we move on, because you wanted to tell that story about Lucy and her award, but this is your big year where you had 3 awards. Unfortunately, Matthew's not in this photo, but and of course we had Madison here, who was also helping me out, so that was a great photo there. But in 2019, Grace and Lucy won the African American History Award for their website, correct? That was a
Yeah.
website that year. And so what was the story behind that with the interviews?
Yeah. Oh, they did a lot of interviews for that. Their project was on Freedom Summer, and they were really lucky that a library in Wisconsin has preserved more than 50,000 documents,
Wow.
primary source documents from Freedom Summer. Among those documents was a list of everybody who participated and where they were from. And they said, "Look, there's 1,700 people here we could interview." I said, yes, and this is, more than 50 years ago. So what I would recommend that you do if you want to get started on this is pick out the most unusual names on that list
Oh, okay.
and start there. Well, they hit pay dirt, and they got to interview both a Black and a white volunteer for Freedom Summer.
Mm-hmm.
And then as things went on, they were working through massive amounts of primary sources, as you might imagine, as well as a number of secondary source books
Yep.
about Freedom Summer, because there's a lot on that topic. And I don't know how many pages and books those girls went through over the year, but it was thousands of pages.
Yeah.
And so as they started working on it, they really thought if they could find the relatives of one of the civil rights workers who was killed, they would like to talk to that person. And they tracked down Shaney's sister, who has spoken out over the years before about what happened to her brother.
Mm-hmm.
And they called her up out of the blue, and she agreed to do an interview with them. And then we were nearing the end when the girls were getting ready. I believe they had won at states. They were getting ready for nationals. And Grace came to me and she said, we have the perspectives. We have interviews with the perspectives of a civil rights worker who was killed. We have, we've interviewed a couple of people who were volunteers for Freedom Summer. We've found a lot of material. And she said, what I don't have is the perspective from the other side of the Ku Klux Klan members. Of course, they're dead.
Mm-hmm.
But she said, I really want to talk to the wife of, he was the last one to die. He died in prison. And I said, oh, really?
Yeah. I can't imagine what your reaction would have been to something like that.
Well, I went into teacher mode and said, okay, on two conditions. One, that your parents approve of this, and two, that you not use your own phone.
That seems sensible.
So she talked to her parents and they emailed me and said it was okay. And guess whose phone she used?
Yours?
Yes.
Oh, of course.
When she tried to call the lady, she couldn't get through at home. And so apparently she wanted to try in the middle of the day. So she did with my phone. And that was very interesting. She's very professional and said, if there's anything here that makes you feel uncomfortable, you don't need to answer. I'm just trying to get a different perspective on this. But I sat in the room because she was using my phone.
Yeah.
And had the speakerphone on. And anytime the question got a little too close to what happened, the lady would just say, I can't hear you.
Yeah.
And then she finally said something like, I'm a widow, ma'am, meaning she wouldn't have been a widow if her husband hadn't been thrown in jail and died there. And that she got as much out of her as she could, I think, under the circumstances. But they wanted to try to put all the perspectives together of what was going on in Freedom Summer in that entry. And I think they did a good job with it. They weren't even upset about not placing because they said the African American History Award was the one they wanted to win.
Yeah. Yes. Now, to be clear, if anybody's unfamiliar, is the Freedom Summer. That's the infamous murder of 3 students was two white students and a black student who were murdered by the Klan. And they went missing for many days and were later found. And it's the infamous Mississippi burning case that was later reopened.
Yes.
Um,
One of the things they discovered while they were doing their research was Nixon wasn't the first one to have secret White House recordings.
yeah.
And
as a Cold War historian, I'm aware.
yeah. And they found a university that has archived Johnson's secret recordings.
Mm-hmm.
And they dug up the phone call that he had with Andrew Goodman's parents.
Yep. I've heard that. I've actually
Yep.
listened to it myself. Yes.
So yeah, they dug into everything.
Yeah, and honestly, that interview that they had with the widow, if I remember correctly, I think Lucy told me they never even used anything from it because they never got anything that was worthwhile. Is that correct, or am I off base on that?
Only just a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. So, yeah. So in 2019, there you had another award winner. You got to go across the stage again, right? And then last year, of course, was the first year we did a virtual contest for the national contest. Well,
I only had 2 students make it to finals and nobody won.
yes. Well, you had an outstanding affiliate winner that year, right? Joshua Justice.
Oh yeah, I forgot about Josh. Yeah.
Yep. So you had an outstanding affiliate winner, and then you did have 2 finalists as well that made it there. So, and then the other thing I want to bring up before I ask you some other more in-depth questions here is the inflatable lobsters. Now, is of course, if anybody has ever seen any photos on our social media page or has ever been down to the national contest, 2 things are really big down there. One is button trading. All the students trade buttons, trying to collect all the buttons from all the affiliates throughout the week. It's a good way for them to meet students and people from all over the country and even the world, because we do have international affiliates as well. And the other thing is at the Xfinity Center, where Maryland basketball plays, is where our award ceremony is. And we have a parade of states before the award ceremony happens. And so all the students get to go down onto the court, and they march around in a big gigantic circle for, it seems like, eons with everything, and they get to support or represent their state, I guess is what I should say. And so many years, well, not many years ago, let's say probably 6 or 7 years ago, Kathy, you decided that Maine students need a little bit more than just their t-shirts down there. So you purchased these big inflatable lobsters. This is one of my favorite shots of down on the floor. This was actually professionally taken. This one was not taken by me. And that's Matthew Gilbert throwing the lobster up in the air. But then you also made signs as well that were made out of like reusable bags that you found at like.
Yes, I found them at Christmas tree shops.
Yeah, yeah.
And we had them made into signs. And I found the inflatable lobsters at Rennie's. And this goes all the way back to my very first year at NHD, when we had no idea what to expect, and Maine had very few kids there. So 14 years ago, I guess. We only found out the day before that they were planning this extravaganza with the March of the States and the inflatables and the signs. And we had nothing, of course.
Yeah.
So the 2 girls who I was there with, who had won at States, we went to the bookstore at the University of Maryland, and we got some markers and we got some poster board, and somehow we found some sticks. I don't remember how we found those. And we actually, one of the girls had her computer with her. We actually drew some lobster caricatures and marched by with them in a very small group, because Maine had almost nobody going at that point. And so the lobsters just kind of stuck in my brain. And then when I saw those inflatable lobsters, those many years later, I was like, that's it. We have to have those.
Yeah, they're a big hit. I mean, there's a couple of states that have different inflatable animals. that they will march around with, and we have become known as the ones that walk around with the lobsters. And so between me and the former coordinator of Washington State, who they have a big killer whale that they have. For a while when he was there, we were always trying to get our students to attack each other out on the floor there between the two inflatable animals there. So, but yeah, I mean, it's great and it's wonderful, and it brings all the students together. It's something that kind of helps them represent Maine. But I think it's 2 or 3 of these large inflatable ones, and then we have smaller lobsters as well. And it's always funny to see it's typically the dads that will gather together before the award ceremony, and you can see them all trying to blow it up manually. All these lobsters, all of them about to pass out because their lack of oxygen, trying to blow these things up. But yeah, hopefully next year we'll be able to actually have those again, as long as you still have them, and we'll be able to actually march around with them again and get them down there and all that kind of stuff.
Yes, we have a family who has been storing them as
Oh,
well
okay.
as the signs. Kids are very disappointed that they have to hand back the signs and the lobsters, but
Yeah.
we have to have them year by year.
Of
I
course.
just decided that we needed a little more oomph from the Maine delegation when I
Yeah.
got these lobsters.
Yes. I mean, it's wonderful that the program since 2014, when the Margaret Chase Smith Foundation and University of Maine took this over, that we've seen the excitement and the number of students going down to nationals has increased quite a bit. And I remember my first year going down to nationals, not knowing what to expect either. And talking with Noah, who is a former student who actually ended up winning down there in 2014 when he was in high school. Yeah, he was a freshman in high school. I remember talking to his parents down there that year, and they were talking about how they were happy to finally, or to have the coordinator down there that year, because prior to that they would kind of have to latch on to New Hampshire or something like that and hang out with some of them. And
that was bad when we had to latch on to New Hampshire. We didn't want to.
I will say I'm very good friends with the coordinator in New Hampshire. John is great, but yes, I understand that. Yes.
And the kids were like, we are Maine. We don't want to latch on to New Hampshire.
Yes. So yeah, I wanted to highlight some of your accomplishments, especially down at the national level, and how many students you've actually had with all these great research topics and everything like that, and all the successes that they've had over the at least the amount of time that I've been the coordinator. So let me see if I can pop out of the sharing here.
John,
oh, we aren't sharing anymore. Sorry. I just had that.
Sometimes ask me, they're like, how do you do it? And I say to them, well, basically, I just egg the kids on. I have them pick something that they're passionate about for a topic.
Yep.
And I teach normally, not this year, but I teach small mini lessons in grade level groups. They come out of a social studies class 1 day a week for a GT, social studies seminar. So I teach the very specific research skills that you need, from how to pick a topic right up to, how do you refine your entry to go to nationals, and everything in between. And I do a lot of instructing kind of on an as needed basis about how to accomplish different parts of the research process, whether it's learning to do citations or trying to decide what out of a mountain of data is worth looking at, or what do you do if you've got a topic and you have trouble finding information. Every part of the process. We do some mini lessons and some on target, what do you need right now, instruction. But a lot of the time I just egg them on. And I will say something like, well, why don't you try calling so-and-so and see if they would do an interview? You found the phone number. Yeah. Sometimes it just takes getting a little bit of courage. I'm like, you can do this. Now, sometimes that goes awry. And it's a little harder when you are having to teach all of your classes remotely. Because when we would meet remotely, I would use the breakout rooms. And if I had a group working on a project, they would all be in one breakout room. If I had an individual, they would be in a breakout room, and I would switch around between the breakout rooms. So this year I had 3 boys who did their documentary about Ronald Reagan, and we had talked. They spent Halloween interviewing former Attorney General Ed Meese. That was what they did for Halloween. And then it had been mentioned by them that maybe they should try to talk to Jeb Bush. And I said, well, that's a good idea. And I hadn't brought it up for a long time. And then right in the middle of their Google Meet, I go into their breakout room, and I find out in the middle of the school day, in their breakout room, they have somehow, and I do not know how, these kids are better detectives than I am. They had found his home number.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And they called him up, and he wouldn't talk to them. They called back, and his wife answered. And she said he wasn't giving any interviews.
Okay.
So they were disappointed. But I'm like, wait a minute, you called him in the middle of the school day in a breakout room? And they said, well, Miss Kearney, you said it might be a good idea to call him. So sometimes things go awry.
Yeah,
I've never heard of a politician that didn't want to talk and give an interview.
Yeah. So just I'm curious, like why would they, or I guess why interview Jeb for that?
Because he knew Reagan.
Okay, just because he knew Reagan. Okay, I didn't know if he was, because their documentary was on as being the great communicator.
Yes.
Yes, and so I didn't know if there was like something specific, like he was part of, like
no,
something like that. Okay.
So anyway, it didn't work out. Sometimes your interviews do not work out if people don't want to talk, and they learned that.
Well, you know, and this is something I think maybe I've told your students this actually when I've had meetings with them. You know, a lot of the stuff that you get these students to do, and a lot of NHD teachers, not only here in the state but across the country, get these students to do is graduate level work or college level work.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I did my master's thesis on a stand-up comedian who is actually still alive to this day. And, you know, I never had the courage to call him up, you know, and talk to him and interview him for my master's thesis. And so to have students who are middle school, you know, we all know what middle school was like for all of us if you're an adult. You know, to actually have these adult conversations and these thoughtful conversations, and ask maybe some very hard and difficult questions to some people who have witnessed things throughout history that they're studying, is quite amazing that they're able to not only do it but just persevere.
I know that interviews aren't required, and they emphasize that for NHD.
Yep.
But I'm teaching advanced students, and I really want them to have the confidence to be able to do it. And I want them to know how do you structure an interview. So that's sort of an advanced skill. It's not required by NHD, but I really want them to do it if at all possible, at least once.
Yes, it is an acquired skill. And I think even, not even if it's an interview, even just literally calling up a library and speaking to a librarian and asking, you know, what sources do you have that might be helpful to me in this for what I'm studying? So, I mean, even that can be a little bit tricky. But, you know, working at the Margaret Chase Smith Library for, like I do, I mean, we always get a Margaret topic somewhere in our state every year. You know, our recently retired librarian was very good with the students. Angie Stockwell was great with students and was able to always get them a lot of information that they needed. And I'm sure our new person who will as well, Nicole. But let me ask you a couple more questions. I don't want to keep you too long here, but we'll wrap it up here in a minute. But I do have a couple just more broader questions about NHD. So is it, as an educator, why use NHD in your classroom?
Oh my goodness. All kinds of reasons. Number one, engagement.
Hmm.
If the kids pick a topic they're passionate about, they will stay engaged enough to stick with it even when they're doing really hard things like reading college level secondary source books, or learning some in-depth research skills, or learning how to do citations that are always boring. Um,
Yes.
if you have the level of engagement and passion about the topic, then you can teach things at a much higher and deeper level and have the kids engage and not tune you out. The second thing is I do teach gifted kids, and those kids tend to really, really prefer project-based learning.
Hmm.
And this is like the ultimate of project-based learning that you could probably ever do,
Yep.
um, because it's not just a little one-off small project for a class. It's something that engages them across their entire um, year and enables them to learn all kinds of skills that ordinarily they probably wouldn't be learning at this age. I love it. I wish that other areas and other domains had materials and support and that engagement factor for other subjects that I've found within the NHD program. It's really a fabulous program.
Well, as the state coordinator for Maine, I wholeheartedly agree. So I got just a couple more like rapid fire questions here for you, and then we'll let you go. So because I know you have another meeting coming up as well. So, but one of them is, so anybody who, I guess we should have explained a little bit more, just in case people are watching this that aren't fully familiar with National History Day, that this is a project-based learning, like you said, where students do their independent research on topics that they enjoy based on a theme every year, and that they can present their work to professionals in the field in one of 5 ways. So either a website, performance, exhibit, documentary, or paper. I've been doing this for so long, and I still have to think those
Me
three.
too.
Yeah, all right. So I'm just curious, and I don't know if you want to do this, if you want to answer this from a personal perspective or from an educator perspective, and it's entirely up to you. But what is your favorite category out of those 5?
Oh, wow. Um, I would have said website when it was still with Weebly, and now it's with the really difficult website maker, and so
Oh.
it's not a favorite right now.
Yeah.
Um, I also really like the exhibits, especially for younger kids when it's their first time doing NHD. It just seems a little bit more hands-on, and I think it feels more manageable
Hmm.
to them for the first time around as far as how it's structured. I use the booklets, the Making History booklets that
Yep.
NHD publishes for each of the categories. I'm not thrilled about the paper category, but I was never thrilled about writing papers myself. I'm a good, good writer, I'm a good editor, but um, it's just not as creative as the other categories, I don't think. And
Mm.
I love creativity, but some kids really prefer to do a paper.
Yeah.
And
Uh,
the nice thing about NHD is that they have some choice in how to share their research.
Yes, that's true. And this is something that we talked about, especially I was on a committee that tried to standardize this a little bit for the next upcoming this year's virtual contest. So it was a little bit on the same level, no matter what state you were coming from or what classroom or what your positions were. And one of the things that we talked about was the reason we have all these categories is for different reasons. You mentioned exhibits. Some students like that tactile thing of being able to move stuff around. Some students like to get on the web and try to figure out coding and things like that to spruce up those websites and things like that. So it's always whatever their likes are, not even only just on what they are studying, but how they can present it and how best you're going to get interest from them, I guess is what I should say. So, so I guess you said it used to be websites, right? And now it's probably exhibits. That's yeah, that's fair.
I like all the categories. I feel less able to help kids with the technology for the documentaries. They're really good at it.
Yeah.
I'm not. I'm the one that has gone to 2 different workshops at the Apple Store and 2 different workshops in my school district for how to use iMovie, and I've never mastered it at all. Enough to be able to help a kid do it.
Yeah.
But they're, real digital natives, so they don't seem to be having any problem with it.
Well, and you're lucky you have like students that have like, done projects for you, and maybe they go off to high school and then they kind of become a mentor for some of your students and kind of help them out with that.
Yes, that's something that has really helped everybody. In our high school, the kids have to earn 5 elective credits, and they also have to do a certain amount of community service. So coming down and being a mentor to the younger kids can count for either of those things. And it's a really good opportunity for them, and it's a really good opportunity for the middle school kids. We have a lot of camaraderie in our NHD group. You
do.
can tell when they yell at states, right?
Yes. They are all very supportive of each other, so happy when one the other students award or a prize or anything like that. Yes.
Yeah. And then when they go on to high school, they might not have time in their schedule to actually do a project, but they don't really want to give up on the camaraderie either. And so they sometimes do come back to mentor, and they've been a big help most of the time. I mean, back before COVID, we would stay after school to work, and we would keep a stash of snacks and, in my room, my tiny office, and I would come in and snacks would be flying, and the ones throwing the snacks were not always the middle school kids.
Yeah, of course. I mean,
but they've been super helpful, and I didn't actually start out trying to create a mentor program for them. They initiated it.
Well, that's fantastic. I mean, and as someone who, when I was in high school, I had the chance to be a mentor for middle school students at some point too, and actually, it was very enriching. And maybe not at the time, but I'll tell you, it was. But and it's very interesting because I mean, like it's different in every school, of course. But like Bruce Whittier in Poland, they usually have a lot of their high schoolers will come back and they'll judge the junior projects, category projects. So, I mean, it's different in every school, but yeah, I mean, it's still kind of a mentorship there as well. So they give them, provide them feedback and things like that. But here's one for you. If you could make an NHD project, what would it be? So I guess what I'm asking is like what the subject would be.
Me personally?
Yeah, you personally. If you wanted to do a research project right now, what would it be?
It would probably be something to do with African American history or the civil rights movement. I feel like there's a lot of stories that haven't been told. And I actually did a project when I was in graduate school. Before I went to graduate school, I had taken one research class that wasn't worth much of anything because I was interested in historical research and there weren't any classes to take on that. And I had done a lot of work on my own, just kind of figuring out how to do historical research on Lita Hollingworth. She started an experimental school for gifted kids in the 1930s, and she's actually one of the 2 leading early figures in gifted education. So I tracked down all kinds of stuff. I chased archives from coast to coast. I called people. I kind of learned on my own how to
Yep.
do it. And then when I got to graduate school, they had a grant, a Javits grant, to find underrepresented gifted kids in Central Harlem. And most of the other people were involved with the grant directly, as far as going into the classrooms or doing some of the assessments or whatever. One day, one of the students came to me. I worked in the office for the preschool, the campus preschool. So I was right there all the time. And she came in and she handed me this article about gifted African-American children above 160 IQ that had been done by a man named Martin David Jenkins
Yep.
back in the 1940s. And she said, "Have you ever read this? Do you know anything about this?" And I said, I vaguely remember reading it once, but let's take another look. And I looked at him like, "Oh, this is gold." I said, you want to work on a little project? And she said, "Sure." So by the time we were done, we had tracked down 5 early studies of gifted African-American children that had started just about when the field started in the 1920s.